A very good evening to everyone. So, my name is Smriti Shah, and on behalf of Vision IAS, I welcome you all to this open session. And today we are going to analyze basically ethics paper with respect to mains 2021. The session would continue for 3 days, today, tomorrow and day after. And today we will be analyzing approximately 6 questions from the areas which I teach. Tomorrow I think we are planning case study and then the remaining questions of ethics paper. So before we start with today's session, as you can see, there's something I've written on the screen. So basically, if I think you guys are comfortable and you have been watching our sessions before as well, so you know the pedagogy, as in how we intend to proceed, as in especially if I'm talking about my sessions, you know that we have to study through flowcharts. That is how we proceed. So before I start with the analysis of the questions this time, see, one thing is for sure, that after observing like essay paper as well as all the 4 GS paper, and even if I talk about the optional paper, as in if I talk about the area which I deal with, that is sociology, barring essay paper, which was obviously slightly very much unexpected, because all the 8 questions from philosophical area, and we were not mentally prepared for that. So that's another side of the story. But apart from that, if I talk about the optional, as I told you, sociology, or even all the 4 GS papers, the level of the questions which were asked was of medium level, as in not very difficult questions were asked, not barring, obviously there would be certain exceptions, okay? There would be certain questions which were challenging to attempt, that's another side of the story. But overall, if I talk about the level of the questions which were asked, it was more or less on the medium level. Not very difficult questions were asked. In fact, if I look at the kind of questions which were asked this year in ethics paper as well, it was quite attemptable. I mean, as in if you've studied your attitude well, which you might have studied, because attitude is a part of syllabus. If you've studied what are the factors which are responsible for the formation of attitude, which is there in your syllabus itself, right? You've studied socialization with respect to values, which is there in your syllabus. If you've studied emotional intelligence, and if I talk about the quotation based questions, that is with respect to the moral thinkers, to be very precise, the 3 quotes which were asked, even the quotes were very attemptable, as in not a lot of thought process was involved. So overall, if I talk about the questions or the nature of the questions, it was very much within our capacity to attempt that. Now, when the paper, I don't know what kind of marking, that we have to wait for the result, but one thing is observed, that when such paper is asked, the questions are asked, where every individual is able to answer those questions, because not lot of brainstorming is required. In such questions, the more you write examples, the more your presentation is, appealing, the more is the probability of fetching marks, right? One thing. Second thing is that whenever you are preparing, since we are discussing ethics today, so whenever you are preparing ethics, one thing is for sure, that your definitions has to be in your command, right? You should be very thorough with the examples from different walks of life. The more you are comfortable with examples from different walks of life, it would be a cakewalk to write a good answer. But for that, the investment is required before the examination, as in the mental physical investment is required. Why am I saying physical? Because yes, you have to sit at one place, you have to make your notes. And I very well remember that if you've seen those previous open sessions on ethics paper, I have clearly said, like innumerable times, that you have to be thorough with your syllabus, you have to be thorough with the vocabulary, as in every term which is used in the syllabus has to be prepared, not only with respect to the definition, but if you remember, we discussed that every term which is there in the syllabus, for example, if it is written value, so what is value? What are the features of value? Different types of value. What is the difference between value and attitude, or relationship between value and ethics, or value and belief? Are you getting the point? So this is how it has to be prepared. What are the desirable values? Then how those values can be inculcated. Okay? Then examples. So we have discussed that in open session, and for that there is a separate open session which can be viewed, that how to prepare ethics. So that we have discussed, right? Then we also mentioned that how important it is for you to go through previous year questions. Now you must be wondering, ma'am, ये तो मतलब हर बार बोलते हो आप, and in every session you keep telling us, because see, in the last analysis which I took, why am I even mentioning that is just to help you to relate the previous analysis which we had just before the mains examination, and it was 3-year analysis. So there was one question which we discussed with respect to emotional intelligence. What is emotional intelligence? What are the building blocks of emotional intelligence? How emotional intelligence can be developed? We discussed. Another question was with respect to crisis of conscience and how crisis of conscience is observed in public domain. And obviously how it is observed, we would have discussed the examples. I to have proof also. Close open session, you don't even have to join the classroom program. If you have attended the open session in which we have discussed the previous year question, you would have been able to answer this year's question. There was a question how crisis of conscience can be managed or overcome by emotional intelligence. So if you know crisis of conscience, you know the situation of crisis of conscience through example, you just have to, and you know what is emotional intelligence, you know what are the elements of emotional intelligence, how it helps you become self-aware. I'll discuss the answer later. How it helps you in regulating, how it generates empathy, how it gives you social skills. By using these aspects of emotional intelligence, can you overcome the situation of crisis of conscience? You just have to establish that relationship. Is that very clear? Okay, then I very well remember in that open session only, I mentioned that every year there is a tendency of UPSC to ask questions on emotions and values or values. ठीक है, मतलब either they are asking you, for example, what do you mean, what according to you is happiness, and illustrate that by means of examples. So they asked you the question on happiness. Happiness is an emotion. Similarly, they asked the question on hatred. Similarly, they ask the question on anger. These are emotions. Similarly, they have a tendency of asking questions on values. And in that open session, I clearly specified that with respect to emotions and with respect to values, you have to prepare what is the definition of that emotion and value, what are the characteristic feature of emotion as well as of values, and you have to prepare examples from different walks of life that where that value or has been observed or with respect to emotion. This time they asked you the question that integrity is a value which empowers a human being. You should know what is integrity. You should know what are characteristic feature of integrity. You should know examples from different walks of life that how integrity is empowering individual. Is that very clear? ठीक है, तो ऐसा नहीं है कि questions randomly पूछ लिए जाते हैं. It's just that we need to make some investment, an investment so as to prepare ourselves. Obviously 250 marks is on stake. So a good amount of effort has to be made, and the best part about ethics paper is, to be very honest, if slight effort has been put in the right direction, it is not a difficult paper. इनफैक्ट कभी कभी तो मुझे लगता है ये प्रवचन देने का पेपर है ऑन लाइटर नोट, कि थोड़े दिनों बाद ऐसा लगता है कि प्रवचन देने के लिए बैठ जाएंगे कि नहीं, द आउटर वर्ल्ड में द पीस कैन ओनली बी अचीव्ड वंस यू अचीव दैट इनर पीस. तो मतलब ये कोटेशन थी जो पूछी थी दलाई लामा की. सो द पॉइंट आई एम ट्राइंग टू मेक हियर इज दैट इट्स एन इंटरेस्टिंग पेपर. इट इज हाउ well you can play with words, how well you can connect that with the examples, and once you have example, nothing better than that. Is that very clear? ठीक है. So let's on this note get down for the official analysis of ethics paper. See, the first question, as you can visualize, there is a question on attitude, and we are going to discuss that question. But before that, how the attitude as a topic is supposed to be prepared. ठीक है. वैसे तो the best part about ethics is that deconstruction of the syllabus is not required, as in it is already been deconstructed. But just to give you more clarity, this is how one should prepare with respect to attitude. First of all, premise. ठीक है. It is very important that why do you even want to know the attitude of the other person, and why it is important that you are going to be an administrator, right? So let's look from the perspective of a public servant or an administrator, that you being an administrator, for efficient governance, for good governance, you should know the attitude of the citizen whom you are going to administer. Similarly, your attitude also should be right in place. Did you get the point? So it is important to study attitude. Why? Because attitude determines your behavior. Attitude is a specific determinant of your behavior, of your action. So it is very important to know your attitude, because once your attitude is known, it would be easy to describe, it would be easy to predict it will be easy to understand, and finally it would be easy to control, right? So given that, it is important to study attitude, one thing. Second thing, why it is important to have a right kind of attitude specifically for a public servant. Just try to understand this. See, what is most important is all of us as human beings, we have the ability to make informed and intelligent choices. Do you agree with this? Okay, we'll give us that credit that we have that ability of making informed and intelligent choices. And whatever choices that you make, whatever actions that you are making is going to have the consequences for the individuals as well as the collective. Do you agree for that or not? Right? Now, you should be responsible for your actions. Obviously, your actions are having consequences for the other individuals as well as for the collective. You should be responsible for your actions, right? Now, there are two individuals, one who's not a public servant and other who is a public servant. Do you realize that the gravity of the consequence of the action of a public servant is any day much severe than that of an ordinary man? Because every action of public servant is going to have ramification for a large collective. Right? So they have to be responsible for their action, and for which they should have right kind of attitude. Because if you have right kind of attitude, the behavior is determined by your attitude. Is that very clear? So it is important to study attitude from that perspective. Then obviously you should know what is the definition of attitude. Okay? You should know what are the features of attitude, what are different types of attitude, positive attitude, negative attitude, bureaucratic attitude, democratic attitude, moral attitude, political attitude. So you should know. Then components of attitude, right? Components or structure of attitude. There is a CAB model or ABC model. You have to study. That's there in your syllabus as well. Then functions of attitude. Daniel Katz की theory है, functional theory hai of attitude. Then attitude formation. What are those factors which determines the formation of attitude? So that is nothing but how attitude is formed. It is formed through the process of socialization. So different agencies of socialization, different methods of socialization, you study all of that. Then obviously not always attitude is consistent with behavior. So there are certain elements which determines the consistency between attitude and behavior. Then obviously how the attitude can be changed, it can be changed through the process of social influence or persuasion, and then these topics have to be discussed in detail. So this is how the topic has to be prepared. So now let's quickly see what question was asked, and you will understand that the question was very much from the syllabus. Attitude is an important component that goes as input in the development of human being. Obviously, एक saying है ना, your attitude determines your altitude. So what kind of attitude you possess will determine what kind of success you will achieve in your life, what kind of interpersonal relations you have in life, what kind of or whether you have that attitude of perseverance or not. Will you be able to thrive amidst adversity or crisis? So all of that is determined by your attitude. Is that very clear? Okay, so attitude determines your altitude. So attitude is an important component which goes as input in the development of a human being. How to build a suitable attitude which is needed for a public servant. Public servant, first of all, need to have a suitable attitude. What kind of suitable attitude he should have, that should be defined, and how that suitable attitude should be built, that is the question which is being asked. Is that very clear? Now, I have given again the same strategy. I've given you different definitions. Whichever definition you are comfortable with, you can choose. Just one disclaimer. Again, I'm saying the same thing. हर चीज नहीं लिखनी है. I am giving you an elaborated answer just because there is no guarantee that the same question would be asked. But I will provide you enough fodder that if something related to this has been asked next year also, you will be able to answer. That's for sure. Okay. So what do you mean by attitude? Attitude is nothing but readiness of a psyche to act or react in a certain way. Or what is attitude? It is the values which are tied with an object, event or person is known as an attitude. Is that clear? Attitude is something which is learned, which is acquired, which is enduring predispositions to respond consistently either in a favorable or in the unfavorable manner towards something, object, event, person, or class of object, class of event, class of person. There are different definitions. Whichever you are comfortable, you can choose. Is that clear? Attitude is how you look at things on day-to-day basis. For example, half full glass. So it is your attitude which will determine whether that glass is half filled or half empty. Is that very clear for everyone? Then again, linking statement. It is important component in development of human being because it is your attitude. यही हमने बात करी ना? It is your attitude which is going to determine your interpersonal relation. It is your attitude which will determine whether you are a successful person or you have failed in your endeavors. It is your attitude which will enable you to find opportunity in the adverse situation. It will enable you to thrive in the situation of crisis. It is all in your mind. Is that clear? You don't have to conquer the world, you have to conquer yourself. You have to be in the right frame of attitude to achieve success. Is that very clear? So for a public servant, अगर right attitude develop होता है तो उससे क्या फायदा होगा? ठीक है? So if you are a public servant and you have a right attitude, it will give you the confidence of initiative. It will make you more compassionate. It will give you courage, fortitude. Is that very clear? It will ensure that you have problem solving approach. That is why I'm looking for a right attitude. So iska matlab, if you look at this statement or this point, here we are trying to establish what kind of suitable attitude a public servant should have. One who has a confidence of initiative, one who's compassionate, one who has courage, one who has problem solving approach, और भी डाल दो, creative, imaginative, constructive, progressive, ऐसा ही तो attitude चाहिए. This is the suitable attitude for a public servant. Is that clear? Okay, so this point has to be written in the linking connect. Now, you don't have to write everything. This is more for your understanding also, that whenever you read this answer later, then you understand in what context it has been written. If you have to write, you can start with one line. It is a readiness of psyche to act or react in a certain way. Okay. Then you can talk about it is an important component in the development of human being as it enables us to find opportunity in adversity, comma, distinguish between success and failure, comma, determines our interpersonal relation. दूसरी line. Third, you will talk about what kind of right attitude one needs to develop in a public servant. दो चार points लिख के खत्म. ये आपके explanation के लिए था. That since attitude is a specific determinant of behavior, so public servants' attitude towards the subordinate, towards the senior, towards the citizen, towards the ministry is very important in determining what kind of solution or approach they will come up towards a social problem in the society. Is that clear? Now the question arises that this is the main answer in the body, that what kind or how to build that suitable attitude in a public servant. Now, if you have studied role of socialization, that's there in your syllabus. So when you study that topic, how do you study? What is socialization? That ideological indoctrination or the indoctrination of the child into society's culture, that is socialization. It's a process through which child is inducted in society's culture. That is socialization. Now there are different strategies or methods of socialization: observation learning, role playing, instrumental conditioning. Then there are different agencies of socialization: family, education, media, peer group, religion, role models, leaders, etc. Did you get the point? ये आप पढ़ते हो. मैं आपको सिर्फ एक बात बता रही हूँ कि ये आपके सिलेबस में है. अब आंसर देखो. How to build the suitable attitude for a public servant? The first thing, instrumental conditioning. Attitude are formed by a desire to maximize reward and minimize punishment. This is a process, it's a method of socialization. इसको instrumental conditioning कहते हैं. That if I want to develop a certain attitude in you, I will ensure that if for that attitude you perform that behavior, your rewards would be maximized and your punishment would be minimized. And we have that desire. So जिस भी act के लिए our rewards are increasing and our punishment are declining or minimizing, we will accept that behavior. We will develop that attitude. So it's one of the process of building the attitude. Similarly, democratic parenting. When you study family as an agency of socialization, अब मेरे पास इतना time तो नहीं है that I can teach you everything, but I'm giving you a broad idea. When you study family as an agency of socialization, you study the role of parents. Now there are different types of parenting: autocratic parenting, parenting, permissive parenting, then democratic parenting. It is democratic parenting which is a desirable form of parenting. So you don't have to write in detail, you just have to write democratic parenting by a means of which you can develop compassion, rationality, tolerance among the kids, which later is going to shape their attitude when they become public servant. आप ये तो समझते हो ना कि attitude are long lasting. So attitude are not developed overnight. So whatever values have been given to you in your childhood is largely going to determine your attitude. So right kind of socialization from early childhood is required. ये डिटेलिंग मैंने आपको दी है कि अगर आपको नहीं पता हो डेमोक्रेटिक पेरेंटिंग क्या होती है, then you can refer from here. In answer, you just have to write democratic parenting, which results into development of these values among the kids. However, what is democratic parenting? Democratic parenting is one where the power distance between the parents and child is minimum. The relationship between the parents and child is characterized by equality, by rationality, by openness, receptive of feedback. The parents are exhibiting the value of tolerance and patience. Positive reinforcement is provided for the display of desired behavior. Matlab, if you are displaying a wrong behavior, you would not be punished. But if you are displaying the desired behavior, you will be positively rewarded. So that is nothing but nature of democratic parenting. But utna detail mein jaane ka zarurat nahi. This is only for your reference. Then obviously, social influence for attitude formation. The attitude of a person is determined largely by the environmental setting in which he is being brought up. For example, a person who is born in secular society would be more tolerant of diversity. Is that clear? Similarly, different agencies of socialization, it can play a very significant role in developing the suitable attitude. For example, media by means of vicarious reinforcement. ये तो पता नहीं मैं कितनी बार बता चुकी हूँ. Vicarious reinforcement मतलब we as a human being have a tendency to replicate the behavior for which someone else is being rewarded. So if the right kind of behavior is rewarded, we will have a tendency to replicate that behavior. So if you are rewarding honest public servant, if you are rewarding courageous public servant in the media and you are not rewarding the sycophants, so obviously we would have the tendency to replicate their behavior and automatically that suitable attitude will be demonstrated by us. So media through vicarious reinforcement. Similarly, जैसे family parenting is an informal agency of socialization, educational institutes are the formal agency to inculcate the attitude of brotherhood, excellence, leadership, team spirit, etc. Similarly, peer group. Peer group also plays a very significant role in determining your attitude in life, because it's the peer group which largely influences your life goals, your interpersonal behavior, your organizational goals. So it is the peer group which can also play a very significant role in developing a suitable attitude. Similarly, religion. It can teach you the spirit of service and devotion to the people. Similarly, role models. एक्सपोजर टू द ग्रेट पर्सनैलिटीज. कभी आपने सोचा है कि जब हम छोटे थे इन स्कूल, 15th August, 26th January, फैंसी ड्रेस यूज टू हैपन, राइट? आई डोंट नो वेदर यू गाइज हैव एक्सपीरियंस, आई तो हैव एक्सपीरियंस. सो हमें बनना होता था, कोई गांधी जी बन के आता था, समवन भगत सिंह, सुभाष चंद्र बोस, रानी लक्ष्मीबाई. क्यों करते थे वो? रोल प्लेइंग. That is known as role playing. When you are exposed to such great personalities, you come to know about them. You play their role. So you imagine yourself as Lakshmi Bai. You imagine yourself as Subhash Chandra Bose or Mahatma Gandhi. And then their value system slowly and gradually gets adapted by you. It gets imbibed in you. So that is also a process to build a suitable attitude. Is that very clear? Team building exercises, team events which can involve the participation of public servants like district training हो गई है, remote village internships हो गई, भारत दर्शन हो गया. It also enables to develop right attitude of service among the public servants. Similarly, institutionalization of code of conduct. मतलब a precise and pragmatic set of guidelines to be provided to the public servants so as to inculcate right kind of attitude. And finally, imbibing moral values through the teachings of religious scriptures. Best thing, Bhagavad Gita, निष्काम कर्म करो. ठीक है? You should not have the desire or longing for the consequence of your action. ठीक है, यू शुड नॉट बी कंसर्न्ड अबाउट द कॉन्सिक्वेंस ऑफ योर एक्शन, यू शुड डू व्हाट यू थिंक इज राइट विदाउट बॉदरिंग अबाउट द कॉन्सिक्वेंस. निष्काम कर्म. The moment you do nishkam karm, you become emotionally intelligent person. This is what is written in Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita talks about sthit prajna. Sthit prajna is a state of being emotionally stable, emotionally intelligent person. So ऐसा नहीं है कि emotional intelligence के बारे में सिर्फ डैनियल गोलमैन ने या मेरन सैल्वे ने बोला है. हमारी भगवद गीता में बहुत पहले लॉर्ड कृष्णा ने बोल दिया है that when he was talking to Arjun, he talked about development of emotional intelligence and how emotional intelligence can be developed in an individual through nishkam karma. Is that very clear? Is it making sense? Now you must be wondering, मैम 10 नंबर का क्वेश्चन है, इतना कौन लिखेगा? मुझे भी पता है, सब नहीं लिखना है. फिर बोल रही हूँ, इसमें से 2-4 पॉइंट्स जो तुमको याद रह जाए वो लिख लेना. मेरा तो काम है तुमको डिटेल में देना. What if next time some specific question has been asked? तब क्या करेंगे? ठीक है ना? So your choice. Finally, you can conclude that September 2020, if I'm not wrong, ठीक है, the government had launched Karm Yogi scheme, and it is a step towards inculcating right attitude among public servants. So that is why public servants, since their action has ramification for a wider society, it is very important to build a suitable right attitude among the public servants. It is essential. Is this very clear for everyone? Is the question on attitude clear for everyone? Can we proceed? Next question. This is the question with respect to a specific value. Integrity is a value that empowers the human being. Justify with suitable illustration. Simple question है यार. You have to study values. ठीक है, it is there, role of socialization with respect to values, that's there in your syllabus. So what are values? ठीक है, what are the components of values, what are the features of values, how values is related to belief, how value when tied with the object determines your attitude, when value is seen in the prism of right and wrong, at individual level it is morals, at collective or societal level it is ethics. तो ये जो एक इंटर रिलेशनशिप है, सिंपल वर्ड्स, डोंट गेट बैफल्ड, आई एम सो सॉरी, थोड़ा अकेडमिक हो गया, बट डोंट गेट बैफल्ड. द थिंग इज दैट यू हैव टू स्टडी द इंटर रिलेशनशिप. सो व्हाट इज वैल्यू, what are different types of values, ठीक है, then what are the features of value, ठीक, then what are the interrelationship between value, belief, attitude, moral, ethics, ये interrelationship आपको पढ़ना है. ठीक है, when you are studying different types of values, ठीक है, in that context you have to study the definition of the value, you have to study the features of the value and you have to study the examples. And I remember मैंने वो ethics का जो आपको डॉक्यूमेंट दिया था एनालिसिस में, उसमें क्लियरली लिखा हुआ था compassion, wisdom, honesty, integrity, and with respect courage, and with respect to all these points I have given you the definition, I have given you the features, I have given you the examples. Is that clear? So just look at it. Integrity is a value that empowers the human being. You have to justify this statement with suitable illustration. So now what is integrity? You will start with the definition. So any definition which suits you, that it is a quality of being honest and having strong moral principles. Similarly, you can also say that it is a practice of being honest and showing consistent, uncompromising adherence to the strong moral and ethical principles. Is that clear? Or you can write, when the path of righteousness is followed across time and space, it is known as integrity. So whichever definition, integrity basically not just means you're being honest, it is consistency in your honesty. That is, across time and space, the path of righteousness is being followed. That is what is known as integrity. Then what are the features of a person who possess that integrity? So क्योंकि आपको बताना है ना कि how it empowers the individual. So if a person is having the value of integrity, that person is going to take responsibility for their action. That person is going to manifest humility. That person is going to put the need of others before their own self. That person is going to choose honesty in all the things. This is the characteristic feature of a person who has integrity. Is that clear? Now it is said that when a person is able to maintain integrity, then he is destined for greatness. Why? Because integrity empowers him in different ways. अब आप कहोगे कि ये क्यों? मैंने आपको पहले भी बताया, linking statement helps you to connect the introduction with the demand of the question. Is that clear? So you will choose one of the definition, you will just write comma डालकर कि जो लोगों में इंटीग्रिटी होती है उनके क्या फीचर्स है, and then you will link it that how this integrity empowers him in different ways. Now I have provided you certain points. Again, depending upon the weightage of the question, you don't have to write all the points. Some of the points can be written. The very first point says that if in the family the value of integrity is promoted, then it helps in building a strong character of the child. And once the character of the child is strong, you have been able to build a strong character for the child. That child later is going to be empowered to face any kind of adversity. तो हुआ ना empowerment, ठीक है ना? So it is via integrity you are building a sound character for a child, which will enable him to thrive in any situation of crisis. So you have empowered that person. Similarly, if you are practicing integrity at work, पहले हमने फैमिली के लेवल पे बात करी, अब हम बात कर रहे हैं वर्क लेवल पे. So if you are practicing integrity at work, obviously it will be easy for you to build trust, it will be easy for you to take on responsibility, it will be easy for you to advance in career. In short, you will be able to develop professionalism in the individual. Empower हो रहे हो ना? You are getting empowered at work because it is your integrity which has enabled you to build trustworthy relation. It is your integrity that your boss is ready to give you the responsibility and you are able to advance in your career. Last time Warren Buffett ने question नहीं पूछा था, Warren Buffett की statement पे UPSC ने question पूछा था that in an organization when you are recruiting, you look for 3 qualities, that is your intelligence, your energy and integrity. However, in the absence of integrity, the other 2 can be very dangerous. आ गया ना फिर से integrity पे सवाल? Is this, और वो question मैंने discuss किया है आपके साथ open session में. Is this clear? Then integrity helps in conducting one's professional duties in accordance with the code of ethics. It enables you to put public interest over personal. अभी हमने पढ़ा था ना that what are the qualities of a person who has the value of integrity, that they consider the others' needs have been given more primacy as compared to their own. तो वही चीज है. You can give example T.N. Seshan. He was one person who did not succumb to the government diktats. He was one person who was able to introduce the reforms in the electoral aspect, electoral reforms. In fact, he once told that I am like a ball. The more you suppress me, the more I desire to bounce back. So he did not succumb to the government diktats. In fact, he said, I cherish my rigid intention of integrity. So just by being honest or ethical does not mean you have integrity. When you are honest, when you are following the right path of righteousness across time and space, ठीक है ना, जब circumstances are not in your favor, yet you are standing or holding on to your ground of honesty, that time you are a person of integrity. Perfect example, T.N. Seshan. Is that very clear? Similarly, integrity gives you lot of courage. You have nothing to fear क्योंकि आपने कुछ गलत किया ही नहीं है. So it gives you courage. For example, अशोक खेमका. For example, दुर्गा शक्ति नागपाल. तो आप अपने IAS officers, IPS officers, ठीक है, leaders, you can just take any example. So integrity gives you courage. It helps you in challenging corrupt practices. It is empowering you. ठीक है. Then most importantly, it gives you peace of mind. You have no sense of guilt because you've never done anything wrong. You've always done the right thing. तो आपको कोई guilt नहीं है. तो एक तरह का peace of mind है. You are at peace with yourself. Spiritual empowerment. Similarly, integrity empowers a person in establishing good relation. कहते हैं ना, manifest करते हैं humility. So they are, one feature of integrity is that you are appreciative of people around you. For example, personal secretary to Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam mentioned that how Dr. Kalam used to acknowledge the contribution of others. So if you are a person of integrity, you will always be appreciative of people who are around you, which will again empower you to build good relations in the society. मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली इफ यू आर अ पर्सन ऑफ इंटीग्रिटी, हो सकता है इनिशियली लोग आपको मॉक करेंगे, ठीक है, अरे इसी को ऑनेस्ट बनना है, यही है ऑनेस्टी के करता धरता, सब मॉक करेंगे. But whenever they would be in a situation of crisis or they would require help, they would always look up to you for help or for any need. Why? Because you have the credibility. They will trust your words. They know that no matter what, they will never take advantage of you. So your credibility will always be established in the society. So integrity helps you in your social status, in your prestige in the society. You are considered trustworthy and dependable. Not only that, it is this integrity which is an undisputable trait of a good leadership. For example, Mahatma Gandhi. Post Chauri Chaura incident, when he suspended non-cooperation movement, everybody asked him that it is act of few and our non-cooperation movement is going very well, we are being successful in that, why are you suspending that? But he sticked to his principles across the situation. He was a person of integrity, and that is why he is known as father of nation, right? So it is his commitment to his values, ठीक है, uncompromising adherence to his ethical principles, that is what is integrity. Similarly, Lal Bahadur Shastri, when there was a train accident and he resigned as from the post of railway minister. आजकल देखो कितने एक्सीडेंट, आपको ऐसे लीडर्स दोबारा मिलेंगे नहीं. Is that very clear? So that is the man of integrity. Similarly, it helps in enhancing the social prestige, respect in society. For example, you're a sports person, and Sachin Tendulkar is quite known for his integrity. In fact, I remember Saurav Ganguly के time तक तो मैं cricket देखती थी, उसके बाद से नहीं देखती. So anyhow, so during that time I still remember when Sachin Tendulkar was playing, and I think he was almost on the verge of achieving 100. I think वो 98-99 runs पे थे. आप लोगों को ज़्यादा कुछ याद होगा. So and he was the appeal was made that he is out or something, and the umpire had declared him not out, but he knew that he is out and he left the ground. So integrity, he could have completed his century, but he chose not to because he cannot compromise with his principles. ठीक है. Similarly, it empowers you in resolving conflicts and dilemmas, in making quick decision. क्योंकि जब आप इंसान of integrity होते हो ना, when you are a person of integrity, one thing is for sure, your decision making can be very quick because you are very clear you are going to do the right thing. बात खत्म. चॉइस नहीं रहती फिर आपके पास, फिर आपको ये नहीं लगता अपना इंटरेस्ट सर्व करूं, दूसरे का करूं, क्या करूं. यू आर अ पर्सन ऑफ इंटीग्रिटी. नो मैटर वॉट एवर आर द सर्कमस्टांसेस, दैट एनीवे इज नॉट गोइंग टू इंश्योर कॉम्प्रोमाइजिंग विद योर वैल्यूज. यू विल बी स्टिकिंग टू योर वैल्यूज नो मैटर वॉट एवर आर द सर्कमस्टांसेस. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? सो इट हेल्प्स यू इन मेकिंग क्विक डिसीजन. सो ऑल सॉर्ट ऑफ एम्पावरमेंट. अब इतने पॉइंट्स हैं, जो आपको मन आए आप वो लिख देना. इज दैट वेरी क्लियर? Conclusion. Integrity enables an individual to follow the path of righteousness across time and space. That's one thing. Hence, they are referred as the basis to achieve success in future. That's one way. Or you can write that it is the integrity which enables you to build an honest character, that is strong moral principles, uncompromising choices, and consistency in commitment or consistent commitment. And all these things, whether it is strong moral principles, uncompromising personal choice, or consistent commitment, these are the founding pillars for an individual to achieve success in future. और है कुछ एक लिखना है. Don't start writing everything that comes, that has been written here. ठीक है? I hope we are clear on this. Let's look at the statement based questions which have been asked. The first question: every work has got to pass through hundreds of difficulties before succeeding. Those that persevere will see the light sooner or later. Swami Vivekanand. Take 1 minute, try to read the statement again. Every work that you do has to pass through a lot of difficulties before you succeed. Those who are able to thrive, to survive through these difficulties will be successful sooner or later. ठीक है ना? So UPSC aspirants should not worry if you are not successful in the first attempt or in the second attempt. ठीक है? The one who persevere will be successful sooner or later. Is that clear? I give up on UPSC after 3 attempts. After 3 attempts, I did not attempt any further. Okay? That was my choice. In case I would have thrived through challenges, you never know, I might have. I cannot say because मैंने तो दिया ही नहीं फिर. अगर देती तो शायद there are a lot of people who succeed in their 5th or 6th attempt, right? So the point here is that every work has to pass through difficulties before success, and those who persevere will see the light sooner or later. It's a statement by Swami Vivekananda. The question which UPSC said, what do you understand by the following quotations? It is up to your interpretation. UPSC is being very kind to us. What is your understanding with respect to the statement? What have you interpreted from the statement? That's your choice. So there are different ways in which the introduction could have been written. The first thing, you start with the definition of perseverance, if you know. Okay? So it is a continued effort to do or to achieve something amidst the difficulties, challenges, failure, opposition, etc. So it is continued effort to do or achieve something amidst difficulties, failure or opposition. That's the definition of perseverance. If you don't want to write it like this, you can start with the understanding of the quote. For example, one is likely to face many challenges throughout their life while pursuing their goals, or even day-to-day activities also, whatever you are performing, one is likely to face many challenges. Every step that you take might create new expectations and obstacles, but then you don't have to fear those obstacles, because those obstacles are nothing but normal part of your life. In fact, it is the hardships which enables you to grow. It ensures your growth because these hardships provides you experience in life. In fact, it is these obstacles, if you are able to thrive, if you are able to survive those obstacles, it will ensure development of resilience capacity. So one should not fear these obstacles. Is that very clear? So you don't have to write in so much of detailing. This is just what came to the mind and I wrote. You need to understand everybody faces challenges. And in those challenges, whenever you are performing the task, you will be confronting certain obstacles. However, one should not fear those obstacles, because it is those obstacles which will ensure your growth. It is those obstacles which will help in developing the resilience capacity. बस इतना करके आप छोड़ सकते हो. Is that very clear? Or you can start with the premise. For example, COVID. That's the best current example which can be used. The COVID pandemic has ravaged the whole world and it has affected millions. The human race has witnessed such pandemic in the past as well. But we have been able to overcome these challenges through perseverance. Is that very clear? ठीक है, that's another way of starting. अभी हम सिर्फ introduction की बात कर रहे हैं, linking para पे आए नहीं हैं. So this can be written. Or there is one more thing which can be written, that if you have to be successful in life, you have to begin. ठीक है, the journey of miles starts with the first step. So if you want to be successful, you have to perform an action. And the essential component of any action is perseverance. Is that very clear? So what is perseverance? Showing persistence and courage towards achieving goals despite challenges. So whether you start with that, to be successful, you need to perform an action. An essential aspect of an action is perseverance. And what is perseverance? Showing persistence and courage towards your goals despite challenges, or COVID pandemic, or what is the meaning of the quote, or the definition of perseverance. Out of these four, you can start with any. However, the linking statement is, there are numerous examples of great personality in our history who have faced challenges, but they have persevered. Is that very clear? Now it is your choice what examples you intend to choose. For example, Jack Ma. He failed primary school twice, middle school 3 times. He was rejected by police force and then KFC also. He applied for Harvard 10 times but was rejected every time. He showed perseverance and now he is the founder of Alibaba, one of the biggest e-commerce company. You can give example. You can give example of J.K. Rowling, how around 12 major publications rejected the script of Harry Potter. She was shattered, but she was not defeated. She kept on approaching different publications, and finally, her efforts has borne the fruit, and rest is history. Thomas Edison, he tried 2000 different material in search of filament for right bulb, but failed. His assistant complained, all our efforts in vain. Edison replied, no, in fact, we have come a long way, as now we know there are exactly 2000 elements which cannot be used to make good bulb. It was his perseverance which earned him the merit of being the most prolific inventor of our lifetime. Is that very clear? अब आप ये बोलोगे मैम इतना बड़ा बड़ा लिखना, नहीं, ये मैंने आपको इसलिए दिया है, व्हाट इफ ऐसे आ जाए तो होना चाहिए ना इंट्रोडक्शन. आप थोड़ा ब्रीफ करके भी लिख सकते हो, बट दिस इज हाउ द पॉइंट्स हैव टू बी रिटन. रखा है ना, जस्टिफाइड थ्रू इलस्ट्रेशन. महात्मा गांधी, ऐसा नहीं है कि मैंने इंडियन एग्जाम्पल्स नहीं इनकॉर्पोरेट कर रहे हैं. Mahatma Gandhi, he pioneered Indian freedom struggle and faced all the challenges that British Empire could throw. He kept persevering and finally gained independence for India. Similarly, Sandeep Singh, sports person, you can give examples. He made his international debut in 2004. At the peak of his career, he had the best speed in the world in drag flick, hockey play. However, 2006 he was injured due to accidental gunshot in the train, which left him paralyzed and on wheelchair for 2 years. But it was his perseverance which enabled him not only to make a glorious comeback, but established himself as a vital cog in the Indian side. So you will face challenges before succeeding, but it is your perseverance which will take you to places. Then you can give example of Dhirubhai Ambani, you can give example of E. Sridharan, you can give example of Arunima Sinha, who is the first female amputee to scale Mount एवरेस्ट. तो आप कहीं से भी, आप स्पोर्ट्स पर्सन का एग्जाम्पल, आप कॉर्पोरेट लीडर्स का एग्जाम्पल, आप फ्रीडम फाइटर्स का एग्जाम्पल, आप इंटरनेशनल एग्जाम्पल्स, आप कहीं से भी एग्जाम्पल्स उठा सकते हो एंड यू कैन राइट. इन फैक्ट, व्हाई ओनली इंडिविजुअल? If we talk about at the nation level also, at or in 1947, India was a young independent nation. There were various challenges. Its territorial integrity was being threatened. Integration of princely states, problem of Kashmir, poverty, population explosion. People were not understanding what is the meaning of non-alignment. ठीक है? It did not agree to ally with any of the power bloc. The power blocs were antagonized with India. There were so many challenges, but it was the perseverance of India as a nation that today, after 75th year of India's independence, we are one of the contenders to emerge as a global power. That is what is perseverance. But now the question arises, how to develop it? Now you must be feeling that हम ये क्यों लिखें? ठीक है ना? Why are we supposed to mention that how to develop? See, this is my personal opinion that ethics paper is prescriptive in nature. Even your philosophical essays जो आते हैं, they don't ask you to prescribe. But then what is the objective of UPSC asking you to discuss these quotations or these values or these philosophies? Because they want, once it is established that you should have perseverance if you want to succeed. That's one thing. It is the desirable trait that has been established. Now the question arises, very briefly tell, how will you develop that desirable trait? एक आध लाइन में लिख सकते हो, it is a key characteristic of a person who has a positive attitude, which is developed as a result of socialization by different agencies, whether family, peer group, leadership, self-belief. It is one's attitude which will enable him to keep walking despite falling multiple times. So that element of perseverance is going to develop if you are a person of positive attitude. How am I going to ensure you have a positive attitude? Through socialization by different agencies. और बस आपको एक जनरल लिख के छोड़ देना है, क्योंकि ये मेन कंटेंट नहीं है. ठीक है? Then you can conclude, as Mark Cuban says, winners make the most errors because they never quit. So conclusion, a wise man once said, try and try again till you succeed. Mount Everest was not climbed in first attempt. Space missions were not successful for many countries in first attempt. Social change is not achieved in first attempt. Hence, it is the perseverance which is a tool which enables us to see the light at the end of tunnel. Is that very clear? ठीक है. और ऐसा कोई बहुत हार्ड एंड फास्ट रूल नहीं है, बट अच्छा लगता है जब आप किसी एक स्टेटमेंट या कोटेशन से एंड कर देते हो. इट लुक्स नाइस, इट्स जस्ट दैट. ठीक है. इज द क्वेश्चन क्लियर? आर द एग्जाम्पल्स क्लियर? ठीक है, ऑब्वियसली आपको सारे एग्जाम्पल्स नहीं लिखने हैं, 2-3 लिख देते, बात खत्म हो जाती है. वी कैन नेवर, इसी की मैं बात कर रही थी कि मुझे ना प्रवचन वाली फीलिंग आ जाती है. वी कैन नेवर ऑब्टेन पीस इन द आउटर वर्ल्ड अंटिल एंड अनलेस वी ऑब्टेन पीस विद इन आवरसेल्व्स. ठीक है, so if you want to ensure peace in the outer world, the peace has to be there in inner self. Is that very clear? ठीक है, so you can start with one of the means of starting the answer is you can explain the meaning of the quote or the context in which the quote has been given. So if you know the context, good enough for you. For example, Dalai Lama was awarded the Peace Prize for advocating peaceful solutions based on tolerance and mutual respect in order to persevere or preserve the historical and cultural heritage of his people. He has defined, ये पहला पैराग्राफ सिर्फ आपकी नॉलेज के लिए है, it is not required. In case you know the context good enough, otherwise you can just avoid it. What is important here is that Dalai Lama has defined peace not merely as absence of war, but where human rights are respected, where people are fed, and where individual and nations are free. This is an important element in case you know. अगर ये भी नहीं पता है तो ये भी छोड़ सकते हो, ठीक है ना. So in general, he defines peace not merely as absence of war, but where human rights are respected, where people are fed, and where individual and nations are free. This is how Dalai Lama has defined peace. He talked while defining peace about the peace in the outer world, and he said which can only be achieved once you achieve inner peace. ठीक है. Gautam Buddha says peace comes from within. One should not look for it outside. ठीक है. So give example of Ashoka, that after the carnage of Kalinga war, he renunciated the war, right? He took the policy, he adapted the policy of Dhamma. So it was only when he achieved that inner peace that the peace in the outer world was ensured. And then you can establish the contrast with Duryodhan or with Ravan, any one of the mythological characters. Absolutely you can do that, right? हम पढ़ते ही हैं emotional intelligence in Indian context, where we talk about how Duryodhan could not come to peace within his inner self. He was governed by desire, he was governed by anger, hatred towards Pandavas, and which was responsible for Kurukshetra, which was responsible for complete debacle of their empire. Right? So that is how you can draw that stark contrast, that how it is the inner peace which enables to establish the outer peace. Take example of Ashok, take example of Duryodhan to show the contrasting sides. So that's one way of doing it. Anyhow, you can start with defining what is inner peace. So it's a state. Suppose करो आपको ये सब कुछ नहीं पता था कि दलाई लामा ने किस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में कहा है. यू डिडंट इवन नो दैट व्हाट वाज और हाउ ही डिफाइंड पीस. लेट अस से ये सब हमें कुछ नहीं पता था, छोड़ो, यहां से शुरू कर दो. दिस इज अनदर वे ऑफ राइटिंग द इंट्रोडक्शन. व्हाट अकॉर्डिंग टू यू इज इनर पीस? इट्स अ स्टेट ऑफ बीइंग मेंटली एंड स्पिरिचुअली एट पीस. It doesn't mean that there is no noise or adversity. It means that amid that noise and adversity, you can still feel calmness and peace in your heart. It's a state of और है ये, इनमें से कोई भी एक चीज लिखनी है. ये मत सोचना कि मैम ने कहा है तीनों लिखना है, ये में और है, ठीक है. It's a state of calm, serenity, tranquility which arises because you don't have any suffering, such as you don't have anxiety, you don't have greed, you don't have anger, you don't have desire, you don't have hatred or ill will. जब ये सारी चीजें नहीं होंगी ना, you will be in a situation of calm, serenity, tranquility, and that is what it means when we say inner peace. कितना अच्छा लग रहा है सुनने में भी, ठीक है. So the point here is this is what it is when you talk about inner peace. यही चीज भगवद गीता में लिखी है. और भगवद गीता ऐसा नहीं है that you have to study this. It's just that you study emotional intelligence in Indian context anyway, right? So भगवद गीता में ही बात करी है उसकी. So it says that desire and anger is the source of your downfall. So when you don't have those feelings like desire, anger, greed, hatred, automatically you will be at peace with yourself. ठीक है, you will be in a state of calm. ठीक है. Now what are the advantages if you are able to ensure or develop inner peace? क्यों? क्योंकि क्वेश्चन कह रहा है कि outer peace would be ensured only when there is inner peace. तो पता तो हो what would be the advantage. Let us suppose I am in this state of mentally and spiritually at peace. How it is going to be advantageous? Obviously I would not have any negative thoughts. I will be focused towards my goals. I will trust, I will have belief in my own self, I will stay calm in all the situation. As a result, I will have patient attitude, I would be more tolerant. It will reduce my mental physical illness because वो anxiety, वो डिप्रेशन, वो सब चीज़ें नहीं होंगी. I will be at peace with myself. It will create a path towards happiness. So in all, these are the advantages of inner peace. And it is through this inner peace that you can achieve the outer peace. And outer peace does not mean lack of conflict. Nahi. Outer peace calls for societal harmony. Conflict is bound to happen. You should have constructive solution to the conflict. In fact, conflict should be seen in a constructive, क्योंकि जितना conflict difference of opinion होगा उतना अच्छा है. You will come up with something more progressive, but then there should be a constructive means to diffuse conflict. That is there. So yes, outer peace does not mean lack of conflict. It calls for societal harmony. It calls for equality. It calls for fraternity and brotherhood. It calls for sustainable future. It calls for religious harmony. Societal harmony as an absence of hostility between the social groups. You should not have prejudiced attitude towards other groups. ठीक है? You should not have hostility or mutually antagonistic attitude towards each other. There should be equality in the society, that is respect and equity between unequal identity groups. There should be fraternity and brotherhood between different social groups, community, nations. Sustainable future where everyone has equal rights and equal access to the resources and are living a dignified life. That is sustainable future. And religious harmony, we mean all religions should agree upon the necessity to control the indisciplined mind. It is this indisciplined mind which harbors selfishness, and each religion should teach us the path which is leading to spiritual state. Is that very clear? So among the religion also there should be an harmony, that every religion should teach their followers how to lead a life of spirituality. Is that very clear? They should teach us how to control this indisciplined mind which is harboring selfishness. Now the question arises, we have established that inner peace के ये advantage है, and it is this inner peace which will enable us to achieve the outer peace. Before suggesting how to develop inner peace, I told you now, when you establish a fact, fine, this is true, then you have to tell the person how to develop that inner peace. But before that, if you want, you can write these examples to justify the above mentioned argument. That is, Ashoka, after the carnage at Kalinga, devoted himself to the pursuit of Dhamma. He renunciated the war. On the contrary, Duryodhan, whose heart was filled with desire, anger, hatred towards Pandav, it was through his action which led to the war of Kurukshetra. So this is the stark contrast. Then comes how one can develop inner peace. Okay. So before we discuss this, there is a statement. According to Nehru, he says, Nehruji, that lasting peace can come to a peaceful mind, and it is through compassion, tolerance and emotional intelligence that one can achieve peaceful mind. So according to Jawaharlal Nehru, lasting peace, matlab overall outer peace, can only come to a peaceful mind. And how to ensure that peaceful mind, that is inner peace, is through compassion, tolerance and emotional intelligence. Compassion, tolerance, emotional intelligence. ये मैंने इस तरह से क्यों दिखाया? क्योंकि ये statement पढ़ा था. From the statement, we got the argument that in writing the answer, how to develop inner peace, what can be written. So compassion. Compassionate people have balance of mind and physical health, which leads to development of positive emotions. Tolerance, obviously, it is a threshold of achieving peace and developing mind for absorbing multiculturalism. Emotional intelligence, one can control their negative emotions. What is emotional intelligence? That is ability to reason with emotions and to use emotions in reasoning. अभी हम discuss करेंगे, ठीक है? Is this very clear? Or that's one way of writing. If you don't want to write this, let us say we didn't know the statement of Jawaharlal Nehru, हमको नहीं पता था, आप normal बात भी लिख सकते हो. बातें तो हम बनाते ही हैं. Inner peace कैसे develop होगा? Meditate करो regularly. अपने आप को distant करो from toxic people. avoid doing things without your own will, because you have to take responsibility of your action, right? So you should not do anything which goes against your will, and you should never underestimate yourself. You should never go in that mode of self-criticism. You should be critical so that you can further progress, but you should not go into that trip of self-criticism. I am good for nothing, I can't achieve anything. ऐसा कुछ भी नहीं. You can do everything in your capacity. So remember your own worth. तो ये तो नॉर्मल बातें, ये तो हम वही प्रवचन वाली बात हम नॉर्मली बोलते हैं ना कि यू हैव टू डिस्टेंस योरसेल्फ फ्रॉम टॉक्सिक पीपल, यू हैव टू मेडिटेट रेगुलरली, यू शुड बिलीव इन योरसेल्फ, यू शुड कंसिडर योरसेल्फ एज वर्दी. ठीक है, तो वो सब है. तो या तो ये लिख देना या ये लिख देना, चॉइस आपकी है. एक लाइन में कंक्लूड कर दो. इज दिस वेरी क्लियर? These 10 marker questions हैं यार, बहुत आराम से आंसर हो जाएंगे. बट कहने का मतलब है whenever you are writing these statement based questions, depending upon the nature of the question, I would always suggest that have that prescriptive attitude. Suggest the prescription, how inner peace can be developed, how perseverance can be developed. तो वो एक लाइन में prescription बता दो. Next question. Life doesn't make any sense without interdependence. We need each other, and the sooner we learn that, it is better for us all. Is that clear? Read this. This is a very interesting statement. Life doesn't make sense without interdependence. We need each other. Life is all about interdependence. आपको मेरी ज़रूरत है, मुझे आपकी ज़रूरत है. ठीक है ना? We need each other, and the sooner we realize this, the better for us all. You students require a teacher. A teacher also require a student, right? Students should not be insulting their teachers. मैं normally कह रही हूँ, मुझे भी लग रहा है मौके पे चौका लगा दो वाली बात है. The students should be respectful towards their teacher, because you, at the end of it, you require the experience of your teacher. You require the knowledge of your teacher to further progress in life. At the same time, even the teachers should be respectful towards the students, because without the students, there is no existence of a teacher. Whom will I share my knowledge with if I don't have my students to listen to me? So I also should appreciate the patience of the students, that they are listening to me. ठीक है ना? Similarly, the students also should appreciate the effort of a teacher who's, working for them. मैं तो मजे ले रही थी सिचुएशन के, but did you understand? ठीक है? You cannot thrive in isolation. The children should be respectful towards their parents. Similarly, the parents also should not underestimate the potential of their children. Employer should appreciate the efforts of their employees. Similarly, the employees should also appreciate the effort of their employer. So it is a mutually interdependent relations. And if you don't, we all believe if we start achieving success, we start taking the credit of the success. I would have done it in isolation. So that should not be the attitude. अकेला चना भाड़ नहीं फोड़ता है. I'm sorry for the Hindi, मुझे समझ नहीं आ रहा था इंग्लिश में कैसे बोलूं, but this is the same. You need that cooperative, concerted effort has to be made. We are interdependent on each other for physical help, for financial help, for emotional well-being. Is that very clear? ठीक है? So I'm just helping you to deconstruct. It's a very interesting question. ठीक है? Now, how you can introduce? Either you can start that interdependence is not an opinion. I am not providing my opinion to you that we need to be interdependent, we are interdependent and we need to accept this. नहीं, it's a fact. We are interdependent. So आपके मान लेने से या नहीं मान लेने से कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ेगा. But the good thing is, the sooner you realize that this is a fact, we are interdependent on each other, the better it would be for you. ये मतलब है इसका. So interdependence is a fact. We human are social animals, we are social beings, we cannot thrive in isolation, right? So we are interdependent on each other, and the quality of the life that you are going to lead would be determined by the fact how quickly you accept the fact that we are interdependent on each other. So that's one way of initiating. If you want, you can do it this way. Otherwise, what you can say is that example देके current context में, and I am कहते नहीं है my personal experience that how we are interdependent and how it has enabled us to overcome the crisis of COVID. I don't know, I should not say this, but yeah, in the second wave my father was admitted in the hospital and we were in that, you know, deliberate situation, a very desperate situation was there. I'm just sharing this personal just to make you understand that this period of COVID and how the strangers were helping each other, whether it was oxygen cylinder, whether it was remdesivir, whether it was availability of hospital bed, and we were standing outside the hospital and we didn't even know each other and we were just interacting कि अरे आपके family member को क्या चाहिए, and we were, you know, providing food. Sometimes some person used to get food for all of us, sometimes because we cannot leave our family members alone in the hospital because there were a lot of crisis, and for the first time it realized that not everyone is bad. In fact, majority of the people are good, right, in the society. So that is what you need to realize, that you cannot thrive in isolation. The importance of interdependence was realized during COVID-19 lockdown. I think that was more a personal example which I wanted to write, but it was a very relevant example here, where people came together voluntarily to help the needy with the oxygen cylinder, with food grains, with other essentials. That is the power of interdependence. And the more you realize, you will take care of your social relationships. आजकल हम इतने individualistic, इतने competitive हो गए हैं. We want to succeed no matter what is the cost associated with the success. We don't even realize that when we'll reach the level where we wanted to and we have no one around us to share that happiness or success with, that success would not have any value. So the quality of life, no matter how much materialistically you might have grown, but spiritually, collectively, emotionally, socially, you have not achieved anything. So that is what it means. Is that clear? Or you can start with the essential virtue of human animal existence is that they follow the principle of interdependence. आपको मुझे COVID-19 वाला example अच्छा लगा था, आपको जो और देना हो आप दे सकते हो. Then there are different manifestations of interdependence. Directly we'll come to the point. At individual level, there is a life cycle of interdependence. See what I mean by life cycle. Right from birth till old age, the person is playing different role of interdependence. When you are a son or a daughter, you are dependent on your parents for your socialization, for your education, you know, for your pocket money, everything. Okay? But it is the same parents who in their old age are dependent on their kids for social support, emotional support, physical support, all of that. It's a life cycle of interdependence. Is that clear? So that is what it meant. Similarly, individuals are dependent on various agencies of socialization for the inculcation of values, whether it is family, school, peer group. So individuals are dependent on the agencies of society for socialization, and in turn, society's moral fabric is determined by the values of these individuals. Interdependence है यार. Society बिना individual के क्या है और individual बिना society के क्या है? Is this clear? Then at societal level, the society is like an organic whole and interdependence plays a very vital role. Similarly, crisis of COVID. With respect to emergency protocols, do you think we would have been able to establish those emergency protocols or tackle those emergency protocols had it not been the interdependent nature? Is that very clear? So society has contributed immensely to tackle those emergency protocols. What if the government is making those protocols and we as a society are not adhering to those protocols? So government is also dependent on society, on us for successful implementation of their laws, and we society is dependent on our government with respect to making of those laws. So government is nothing without citizens, citizens is nothing without their government. We are interdependent. Is that clear? Similarly, caste grouping. So traditional Varna hierarchy was there. Jajmani system, economic interdependence. Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Brahmins, acquisition of knowledge. Kshatriya for administration. Vaishya for trading, cultivation, and Shudras for serving the above mentioned caste. Then similarly, rural versus urban. Rural is dependent on urban society for the equipments which is used for agriculture. Urban society is dependent on rural areas for the agriculture products. Similarly, natives and migrants. Similarly, different regions in India. And why did I pick up these examples? Because if you don't realize you are interdependent, for example, in many states you might have seen son of soil, cities या states में son of soil happens, ठीक है, where you have this agenda against the migrant population. Do you realize how important is that migrant population for running the economy of that particular state? ठीक है ना? So the point which I'm making here is natives are dependent on migrants. Similarly, migrants are also dependent on natives for their survival, as in for the opportunities. Is it clear? So there has to be a mutual interdependent relation. क्योंकि जितनी जल्दी ये समझोगे उतने कम कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स होंगे. Is that clear? ठीक है? National level. For example, to sustain democracy, you have clear-cut distribution of power. Legislature, executive, judiciary, they cannot thrive in isolation. They work in tandem, and that enables them to sustain democracy. Similarly, the interplay between the central government and the state government, whether it is policy making, implementation, serving the poor, what is the underlying feature? It is the interdependence. Can center thrive without state? Can state function without center? Absolutely not. Similarly, social capital in the society. Social capital, it is the trust, the networking between different individuals that is very important for a nation to progress. So yes, at national level. ग्लोबल लेवल, ये तो डेफिनेशन ऑफ ग्लोबलाइजेशन ही साफ कहती है. ग्लोबलाइजेशन क्या है? ग्लोबलाइजेशन इज डिफाइंड एज अ प्रोसेस ऑफ ग्रोइंग इंटरडिपेंडेंस. इंटरडिपेंडेंस बिटवीन द वर्ल्ड्स इकोनॉमी, सोसाइटी, कल्चर, पॉपुलेशन. हाउ? थ्रू क्रॉस बॉर्डर ट्रेड ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, थ्रू फ्लो ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन, इन्वेस्टमेंट एंड पीपल. तो यहां तो साफ एस्टैब्लिश हो रहा है कि इंटरडिपेंडेंस है. Is that very clear? For example, India has upheld the value of Vasudev Kutumbakam when its engagement with the world. Similarly, with respect to COVID vaccines, the role of interdependent nature, how the developed countries, because they had the potential for research and development, they had developed the vaccine for COVID, and how those vaccines were made available for the underdeveloping and the poor nations. So this is nothing but interdependence. Similarly, India's upper hand in generic medicines have been helpful in tackling the disease like HIV, AIDS in poor countries of Africa. Similarly, with respect to gadgets, ये तो सबको पता है, एप्पल के लिए, ठीक है, डिजाइनिंग कहीं हो रही है, चिप मैन्युफैक्चरिंग कहीं हो रही है, असेंबलिंग कहीं हो रही है. So there is interdependence which is existing. So interdependence is not only at the individual level or societal level, it is even at national and the global level. Is that very clear for everyone? Similarly, environmental level. It is our human greed, individualistic, self-centered attitude of our humans to accumulate wealth at any cost, which has resulted into degradation of environment. और अब क्या हुआ? In turn, it is our human survival which has come under threat because we were dependent on the nature for our survival. Is this very clear? So all these examples could have been written. 10 marker है, जो strike करे वो लिख देना. Hence a paradigm shift, इसीलिए बता रहे हैं, prescribe कर रहे हैं अब. Hence a paradigm shift is required in your thought process from a competitive individualistic approach to a cooperative interdependent one, because that is required not only for your happiness or well-being but even for your own survival. Because in case you don't accept the fact that we are interdependent, it will create grounds for conflict and tensions in the society. So whether it is conflict between nations, whether it is conflict between community, caste conflict, regionalism, communal violence, ठीक है ना, between natives and migrants, son of soil theory, why it is, or the conflict between the neighboring countries, India, Pakistan, India, China. Are you getting the point? You need to accept the fact for your own good survival, happiness, well-being. You need to accept you cannot thrive in isolation, whichever level. Disintegration of joint family. आजकल के youth को लगता है हम अकेले जी लेंगे क्योंकि हमारे पास फाइनेंशियल इंडिपेंडेंस है. तभी तो एंजाइटी, डिप्रेशन, डिविएंट एक्टिविटीज. क्यों? Because it was your joint family which was providing you social emotional support, which you never valued at that point of time. क्योंकि हमें तो लगता था we can thrive on our own. It is COVID which has actually established the importance of family and the friends in the moment of crisis. Is that very clear for everyone? Is it making sense? ठीक है? Have we understood? तो इतना मुश्किल है नहीं ये स्टेटमेंट बेस्ड क्वेश्चन. एंड ट्रस्ट मी, अब आप पूछोगे कि मैम इसके लिए तो आपने नहीं बताया कैसे पढ़ना है. एक्चुअली द थिंग इज यू कैन नेवर बी प्रिपेयर्ड फॉर द स्टेटमेंट बेस्ड क्वेश्चन. दे कैन आस्क यू एनी स्टेटमेंट, But through these answers, through these discussions, I wanted to establish that आप normally भी बात कर सकते हो इन स्टेटमेंट्स की, और स्टेटमेंट्स बहुत ही सिंपल थे, ट्रस्ट मी। मतलब मैं पूछ रही हूँ आपसे, डिड यू फाइंड एनी ऑफ द स्टेटमेंट विच वॉज डिफिकल्ट कि नहीं मैं क्या लिखूँ? आप वो एक इनर्शिया यू शुड रिमूव, आई एम सॉरी फॉर द हिंदी, जस्ट रिमूव दैट इनर्शिया। हो दिस इज द क्वेश्चन आस्क्ड बाय यूपीएससी, हाउ एम आई सपोज टू राइट इन द एथिक्स पेपर? नहीं, जस्ट मेंटेन योर कामनेस, just approach. This is a statement which is given to you. What do you understand from the statement? Now I'm telling you, after discussing these 3 questions, that a general approach, ठीक है, obviously you can't be prepared. आपको क्या पता था कि वो दलाई लामा का क्वेश्चन पूछेंगे या स्वामी विवेकानंद का पूछेंगे? What if they would have asked you about any Western philosophers, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, महात्मा गांधी, कुछ भी पूछ सकते थे ना? So there is no hard and fast rule कि this is what they are going to ask. ऐसा कुछ नहीं है. The moment you see the statement, if you know the context in which the particular thinker, philosopher has given the statement, good for you. In case you don't know, it is much better. Because sometimes ignorance is bliss. When you exactly don't know in what context the statement is given, or what was the actual statement or the meaning, then it opens the statement for your interpretation. And anyway, UPSC has asked, what do you understand from the quotation? So they have also given us the permission to comprehend the statement, interpret the statement according to our own whims and fancies. Is that very clear? Provided it is not very drastically different from the statement. Is this clear? Now, once you understand the statement, you try to deconstruct it and try to look for examples in order to justify the stand. Once you have done that, then try to provide a prescription how that concerned statement or the value or the desirable trait can be achieved. That's it. Is this very clear for everyone? Okay, let's take, I think, last question. In case of crisis of conscience, does emotional intelligence helps to overcome the same without compromising the ethical or moral stand that you are likely to follow? Critically examine. Just read the statement again. In case of crisis of conscience, यही question I was telling you, and I've discussed that in the open session. आप देख लेना जाके, अभी जो मेंस के पहले था ना 3-year analysis, उसमें I've discussed crisis of conscience. There were 2 separate questions, crisis of conscience and emotional intelligence. Now read the question. In case of crisis of conscience, they are asking, does emotional intelligence helps to overcome it without compromising the ethical or moral stand that you are likely to follow? Critically examine. This is how you should study emotional intelligence. Concept of emotion, myth with respect to emotions. Generally we believe if you are emotional you are irrational. We believe if you are emotional you cannot make good decisions, you cannot arrive at sound judgment. These are the myth which is there with respect to emotion that needs to be discredited. Then there are different types of emotion: primary emotion, secondary emotion, positive emotion, negative emotion. Then different examples: anger, hatred, happiness, joy, okay, all of that. Then what is emotional intelligence? What are the building blocks of emotional intelligence? Mayer and Salvi ka perspective and Daniel Goleman. Role of EI in good governance, administration, how EI can be learned and EI in Indian context. Is this very clear? Okay? This is how you are going to study. Now, in this particular question, you start with the definition of crisis of conscience. Again, I have given you 3 definitions, choose any one. See, conscience is an inner voice which helps you deciding what is ethical or moral. It's an inner voice which tells you this is right, this is wrong. Is that clear? So conscience is an inner voice which helps you deciding what is ethical or moral. So what is crisis of conscience? So there are 3 definitions which I have given. The crisis of conscience situation arises, okay? It refers to a situation when you are worrying because you know that you have done something which is unfair or morally wrong. Then crisis of conscience arises. ठीक है, सो क्राइसिस ऑफ कॉन्शियंस तब आती है जब आपको पता होता है और यू आर इन दैट स्टेज ऑफ वरीनेस बिकॉज यू नो दैट यू हैव डन समथिंग विच इज अनफेयर और यू हैव डन समथिंग विच इज मॉरली इनकरेक्ट, और इट इज अ सिचुएशन ऑफ डायलेमा. You are in a situation of dilemma between different choices and you have been compelled to take action which goes against your voice of conscience. So your conscience is telling you na ki this is the right thing, right? But when you are in a situation of dilemma and you are forced to take that action which is against your voice of conscience, that also creates a situation of crisis of conscience. Or crisis of conscience is defined as a state where individual is going through that feeling of guilt, unrest, dissonance, remorse. So that is a psychological state which is defined as crisis of conscience. Again, I am repeating any one of the definition, whichever you are comfortable with, you can write. For example, मेरे लिए ना I think going back to Bhagavad Gita or taking help of Arjun, Lord Krishna's example becomes very convenient because it gives you a clear picture. For example, crisis of conscience was the state of Arjun. It's a perfect example. Right before Kurukshetra, what Arjun was going through was the crisis of conscience. And it was the teachings, or it was the conversation with Lord Krishna which enabled him to overcome that crisis of conscience. And how it happened? Through development of emotional intelligence. So your Bhagavad Gita is a perfect example of this question. Is that clear? So it was the state of Arjun that is an example or exemplification of crisis of conscience, where he was feeling guilt of waging war against his own family members, cousins, gurus, elders, etc. Clear? Now, what is emotional intelligence? So, एक line की definition लिखनी है तो emotional intelligence is ability to reason with emotions and to use emotions in reasoning. One definition. Or if you want to go for an elaborative definition, so emotional intelligence refers to the ability of identify, to manage, to use, to understand the emotion of oneself as well as the emotion of others in a positive way, right? To diffuse conflict, to empathize, to have effective communication, to overcome challenges, all of that can be written. Then linking statement. Directly you are connecting the introduction with the question that in case of crisis of conscience, which is a very undesirable psychological state of mind, it is emotional intelligence which helps us overcoming it without compromising the ethical standards. How? It enables us to overcome the situation of crisis of conscience. तो पहले तो पता होना चाहिए कि crisis of conscience कहाँ develop हो सकते हैं. Suppose करो आपके senior ने आपको कोई order दिया, you are a public servant, your senior asked you that there is a public which is protesting, so you have to go for lathi charge or pellet guns or tear gas, but your morality is saying no, that is wrong. Because the public is doing peaceful protest and they have the right to protest. You are in a situation of crisis of conscience. If you are emotionally intelligent person, that will give you the courage, to stand by your morals. So you should first know where crisis of conscience can occur. For example, you are in a situation of crisis of conscience, whether I should serve my personal interest or I should serve the interest of the public. Whether I should indulge myself in corrupt practices or I should blow the whistle against the corrupt officers. What should I do? है ना crisis of conscience. ठीक है. Similarly, whether short-term interest should be achieved or long-term interest should be achieved. Are you getting the point? ठीक है ना? So whether my action can cause harm to others or not, you should empathize with others so that you are not performing any act which can cause harm to others. तो पहले पता तो हो कि कौन सी situation में crisis of conscience आ सकता है. फिर आपको लिंक करना है कि हर उस सिचुएशन में, in every situation, I'm sorry for the Hindi, I'm repeating myself in English, that first you should know the circumstances where the crisis of conscience can be used, and second, which is the circumstances or the situation which is generating crisis of conscience, and second, you should be able to establish the fact that how that quality of emotional intelligence will successfully enable you to overcome that crisis of conscience. Now, the first thing, you need to understand, Daniel Goleman has talked about 5 elements of or building blocks of emotional intelligent person. That is self-awareness, motivation, self-regulation, empathy and social skills. If you have read your ethics well, you would be knowing this much. And if you are a fresher who's watching the session, anyway, this is how the answer has to be written. Okay? So you should know now that how you will be going about your preparation. Okay? Now, EI person is one who is not a prisoner of his own feeling. Obviously, I told you they have the 5 elements. याद रखना, in these 5 elements you will find your answer. An emotionally intelligent person is self-aware. He is aware about his values and principles. So an emotionally intelligent person would not be swayed away by materialistic gains. Emotionally intelligent person knows how to self-regulate. The person is not a prisoner of his own feeling. The person knows how to control the impulses, right? So he would not be swayed away by fulfilling his personal interest as against the public interest. Is that very clear? Okay. For emotionally intelligent person knows how to self-motivate, right? For him, the motivation would come by the work itself and not by the rewards or the consequences of the work which is attached to it. Is that very clear? An emotional intelligent person knows how to arrive at decisions based on rational thought process. Is that very clear? So all of that, emotional intelligent person is empathetic. Emotional intelligent person has social skills. So in case there are different communities having different values and a crisis of conscience has arisen, then you know how to persuade. You know how to diffuse conflict because you have that social skills. तो अगर आपको वो 5 points, if you remember those 5 points of emotional intelligence, you can link it. Now see, an emotionally intelligent person is not a prisoner of his own feeling. They have the ability to control impulses. So they know if the situation of crisis arises, whether to serve personal or public interest. Similarly, emotionally intelligent person possesses social skills. So he has the ability of persuasion and resolving conflict. So whenever the crisis of conscience arises because of the different demands of different community, they know how to resolve that crisis. And the example has been given. For example, if you are a DM and crisis of conscience has occurred because there has been an order to execute the dwellings from a patch of forest for wildlife conservation. So you know that in case different groups are there and they have their different demands, then how by resolving to persuasion or a constructive means to resolve the conflict you can arrive at a solution, and that is only possible if you are an emotionally intelligent person. Similarly, when moral values goes against the order of the senior, तभी मैंने कहा था पहले imagine करो वो situation where crisis of conscience will arise, then you can write the answer. So with respect to public servant, order of lathi charge, tear gas, pellet guns on protesting public. So EI will give you courage and inner strength to act with integrity and withstand the adverse situation. Is that clear? Similarly, EI can help in reconciling the divergent values which may be causing crisis of conscience. For example, you are in a situation of disaster. Public servant ultimately has to decide who should be saved considering the limited time to act. So obviously, there are divergent values which are existing that time. It is your emotional intelligence which will enable you to reconcile those divergent values. Similarly, whether a short-term interest should be fulfilled or a long-term interest. So emotionally intelligence will ensure a person to take decision on the basis of rationality. So let us say you are an officer in charge who is responsible for clearing the forest for construction of metro. You might face crisis of conscience that whether the short-term interest of establishing metro should be taken note of or it is the preservation of the forest. So if you are an emotionally intelligent person, you will be able to take the rational stock of situation and accordingly you will be arriving at a decision. Similarly, emotionally intelligent person is empathetic. Hence, they can or they will be staying away from causing harm and suffering to others. Similarly, they are self-aware. They are aware about their values and principles. They would not be swayed away by the materialistic goals. मैं सब बता चुकी हूँ आपको पहले. They have self-control. So, control over anger and desire, which is the main reason for an individual's downfall. Is that very clear? Because when you have desire for something and when you are not able to fulfill that desire, you become angry. When you become angry, you become delusional. When you become delusional, your capacity to differentiate between right and wrong gets crippled and crisis of conscience arises. Is that clear? Is it making sense? Now, you don't have to write all these examples. Since I told you emotional intelligence has 5 elements to it, write 5 examples and just get over with it. Is that clear? However, the question says critically examine. So you might give a counter argument that not always emotional intelligence enables us to overcome the situation of crisis of conscience. For example, in context of while you are following professional ethics, let us say you are a defense lawyer. Okay. Now, defense lawyer, your client has committed a heinous offense of rape. Now, your moral says that a rapist should be punished, a murderer, a kidnapper should be punished. But your professional legal ethics says, since you are a defense lawyer, you have to defend your client. So while in the process of observing professional ethics, your emotional intelligence also doesn't able to overcome the crisis of conscience. For example, in case of abortion, a doctor, due to the professional medical ethics, might have to perform an action which goes against their moral values. Is that clear? No matter how emotionally intelligent you are, you can't go against the professional ethics, no. Is that clear? Similarly, in a situation where you don't have a law or there is ambiguity with respect to law. For example, sensitive issues like surrogacy, like euthanasia. Okay. Although you have laws here, but due to ambiguity of laws in these situations, often you are compelled to go against your moral standards, thereby compromising your moral values. So here even emotional intelligence doesn't function. Is that clear? तो आपको इतना डिटेल में नहीं लिखना, आप 2-3 पॉइंट्स लिख सकते हो. Similarly, let us say there is scarcity of goods. So when there is scarcity of essential goods, you will be compelled to purchase those essential goods from black market, which you know is wrong, but then you have to do it for survival. Similarly, the intel agencies of the government, they are performing those surveillance activities where your value of privacy is getting compromised, but in context of national interest, it has to be compromised. Similarly, in case of compulsion, when your loved one is there, right, your family member, your loved one is there, and let us say the person is dying, and to meet the medical expenses of the person, a lot of money is required, you would not think twice before compromising your ethics. Is that very clear? So there are certain situations where EI is not able to overcome the crisis of conscience. For example, while following the professional code of ethics. For example, in case of absence of laws or ambiguity of laws. For example, with respect to scarcity of goods. For example, question of surveillance versus privacy. For example, case of compulsion. So after that, two kind of introduction has been provided. One, despite being important, sometimes EI may not be sufficient in resolving crisis of conscience. In such cases, better laws, clearly defined laws, rules, regulation are required. Is that clear? One thing. Or you can write, despite insufficiency in some cases, overall EI plays a significant role in resolving crisis of conscience. Establish कर दिया हमने. Now I told you ना prescriptive होना चाहिए, तो एक लाइन में बता दो, it is through निष्काम कर्म you can develop EI, क्योंकि ये main content है नहीं. Is this very clear for everyone? Is it making sense? ठीक है. So with this, the overall discussion as far as my areas were concerned, so these were the 6 questions. Question number 3, question number 4, and question number 6B is what I have discussed it with you today. I hope this, and obviously these slides would be provided. I know many of you might be wondering. These slides would be provided to you in some time. Just go through these answers. I'm putting a disclaimer again and again. Don't be baffled at the comprehensive nature of the answer that is basically written, because there are different set of students who are going to refer to these answers. Each of you have your own writing style. Each of you have your own preferences. So whichever style of writing, whichever definitions, whichever examples you prefer, you can choose from them. Okay. I have given you a very comprehensive, detailed understanding of the questions. I have at least tried doing that, and I hope it has added some value to your preparation. On this note, I am concluding today's session. I hope all of you have enjoyed the session. Take care, people. Good night. Have a nice day. Bye, people.